Welcome, everybody. October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we have Betsy Draper with us to kick it off with a presentation about the state of IT security. So I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Kathy. If you would all please mute your mics, and we are going to record this session, but I'd like to open it up toward the end for any questions. I have some slides that I'm going to share with you today, and one of the things that I'd like to include in my comments is that although I have some general information to share with you, there's a lot that's going on in the security area and continuously changing and update, and so I'll talk about that a little bit as well. So I want to welcome everyone joining us today. My name is Betsy Draper. I'm with Information Technology Services, and I'm currently serving as the Interim Director of Information Security and Compliance. And what I would like to do is share with you on our agenda for today a little bit about what's going on in the news that maybe you've heard or maybe you haven't heard, talk a little bit about what we're doing here at K-State, and finish up with some specific impacts for you and for some considerations for you as not only a member of the K-State community, but from an individual perspective. And again, hope to have time for some questions toward the end of the session. So first of all, in the news, certainly you've probably heard about what's happened here of late with Equifax. Yahoo just made an announcement yesterday. We've heard in the past about organizations like Target and Home Depot, and I just wanted to share, if you do a Google, I'm going to pull up just a couple of sites. If you do a Google on recent data breaches, you'll see an incredible lengthy list of systems and companies that have had breaches. So here I'm looking at the Identity Force website, and I'm just going to scroll through a couple of these, but many of these you may not ever hear about. One of the things I'd like to point out as we're going through this list is if you notice the dates on some of these, they're happening at least every week or several during a week. And so what that tells you is that data breaches, IT security issues continue to grow. It's an area that we have a difficult time getting on top of or ahead of. So I want to preface that in my presentation today, because although I'd like to give you good news, overall the news is not going to be good. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you is a specific comment from the Washington Post, where in an op-ed piece, one of the comments about the Equifax issue in particular is that corporations hold all the power when it comes to your data. And that's a pretty strong statement, but it's not all that far from the reality. And that is, if you participate in any aspect of our global economy, very likely data about you is somewhere and someone is responsible for managing that data on your behalf, and they may or may not do the best job with that. So what I'd like to do is share with you what we're doing here at K-State. So I'm going to talk about 6 different areas of IT security at K-State and do a quick overview of some of the things that we're doing, what we do to try to ensure the best possible security in these areas. So let me start with the internet and network. So on the internet, that is our connection to the internet. We use a service provider, Canren, that is a consortium here in the state of Kansas, and they provide some levels of monitoring and protection, mostly monitoring on our behalf as a customer. But here on campus, we have several different devices, sometimes hardware, sometimes software, that we use to provide some additional protection. So for instance, the first is in the area of a border firewall. What a border firewall does is it creates somewhat of a barrier or a filter between the internet and our campus network. We upgraded our border firewalls in early August, just before classes were starting. We installed some new border firewalls that are next generation and provide some great protection for us. Among that protection is the ability to identify threats before they get to our network. So these border firewalls can prevent bad stuff from coming in. We can also use the border firewalls to prevent some things that are on campus from getting out. We see a lot of potential in the use of these border firewalls, specifically in helping us in combating phishing scams. So that, for instance, when someone clicks on a link, that it takes them to a place that asks for personal information, and that they may give up that personal information and shouldn't. And so this is a way for us to provide some level of protection there. We also use firewalls on our internal network to section off parts of the K-State network so that we can limit the type of traffic that moves on certain parts of our network. And that might be because of the type of equipment or servers we have on the network. It might be the secure nature of the data that's on those servers in the network, and we want to provide another level of protection. So then that moves us down to the servers and services part of IT security. So for servers and services, ITS, Information Technology Services, has some centralized services that we provide. There are also servers and services that are available at the college and department level, and they are managed at those levels. And then there are cloud-based servers and services. So let me start first with the ITS servers and services. In ITS, we have an information security and compliance team that makes recommendations about the levels of security that should be maintained at a server and service level. And so within ITS, then we have other units who are responsible for managing those servers and services and following those security guidelines. Additionally, those security guidelines are also shared with college and departments. And so we have a number of people across campus, in particular, a shout out to our sysadmins who manage and monitor those servers and services, and they provide that level of protection. And then there are cloud-based servers and services. So for instance, if in your department you subscribe to a service or you've purchased a third-party service or system, we do a review on those services and systems to be sure that they meet security guidelines that we've identified for K-State. And I'm going to talk a little bit even further about those when I talk about data. But as an example, among the things that we look at in the servers and services area is the way that people authenticate to a system. How do they log in? And ideally, we want to be able to have folks log in through our central identity management systems, because if they are, if that's administered by an outside party, that means login IDs and passwords are stored outside of K-State, and we want to try to keep that data, that information, internal to the university. So cloud-based environments create an interesting challenge for us to work through, and yet this is also a growing area for the university. And so we recognize that we need to be able to use cloud-based systems, but again, provide the best possible security. In the area of workstations and mobile devices, university-owned workstations and mobile devices, workstations in particular, are expected to be connected or have the latest patches and updates to those systems. This applies to the same as our servers. So we have guidelines at the university of what those should be. We provide tools across the university to enable that, that patching and protection through malware, for instance, using the tool Trend. On your personally owned devices, this is where that personal accountability, that when you bring a personal device on campus, you connect through the wireless, there's an expectation that you're keeping your devices up to date and patched as well. Housing and Dining does a great job of working closely with students in the residential area to keep their workstations and devices patched and up to date, and that really is a critical component of improving the security posture across the university. Data. Oh, this is a big challenge. When it comes to data, there's different types of data, and we have a data classification system. So, for instance, PII data, PHI, which is health-related data, FERPA. There are a number of guidelines that we follow at the university with regard to not only how we classify data, but through that classification, how that data is stored, how it is treated as we are moving it from place to place, whether that's moving it from a data storage to your screen for viewing. That includes things like encryption of certain types of data. And this is another area that becomes very challenging at the college and department levels. And again, we really rely on our system administrators to help manage and monitor what's happening at the college and department level to be sure that data is secured appropriately, that PII or PHI data is not stored in an unsecured area, and that also applies as we look at cloud-based applications and the type of data that is stored in those cloud-based systems. This is really becomes important as departments look at services that they would like to add or make available. One of the considerations we have when we review what vendors are doing is how they manage and handle data. What data are they using, and how are they using it? How are they storing it? How are they transmitting it? So for you individually, you are the best defense that we have, whether you're on campus or off campus. So at ITS, we can provide a level of security specifically on campus. Once you're off campus, the onus really falls on you to be sure that you're keeping your machine patched, to be sure that you're securing important personal data about yourself. And I wanted to share just a couple of sites. If you want to get some more information, and again, we'll take questions here in a couple of minutes, but when you're at the K-State website, if you scroll down to the very bottom, there is a link to information technology to the ITS website. And from there, you have a list of the services that we've got available. Among those services on this page, there's some guidelines on how to protect yourself online, how to secure your data. We also have a list of the policies and procedures that we have here at K-State. So among the things that I would just point out is we have policy with regard to how hard disks should be treated. So for instance, when you have equipment, we don't want hard disks going off campus that might have data on it. So we have policies regarding what you need to do to address removing that data or making that data inaccessible or unreadable on that hard drive or that device. We have guidelines, policies, guidelines on things like peer-to-peer file sharing, how we administer control or access control. So a number of different topics here. On the secure your data, we've got links to information about how to use or sign up for antivirus service, different topics of interest. And I'm going to hop back one more. I'd like to talk briefly about phishing. Phishing is probably one of the biggest challenges we have here at K-State, and that's because scammers are so good at making communication look like it's an official K-State communication. But we will never, ever ask you for your login ID, your EID, and your password. And I want to share in the box here, we've got the number of EIDs that were compromised in 2016. That number was 1246. That means that 1,246 accounts and passwords were handed over to someone that didn't own those accounts, and they used them for all sorts of purposes. At this point in 2017, we have now more than doubled that number, so it's become an even more severe problem. We are starting to gain a little bit of ground there. Recently we've had a decline in our number of phishing scams, but one of the things that you'll see in these resources is a list of the phishing scams that we're seeing, so that if you are not sure what a phishing scam is or what it looks like, you can get some information about those phishing scams. And we really rely on you to report those phishing scams so that we can try to protect others from clicking on those links and compromising or providing EID and password information. So again, I'd like to finish up. This is the link to the security webpage, also available by going to the ITS website. I'd like to highlight the other things that we have going on, and through the month of October with Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we've got a video from President Myers. We have a cybersecurity awareness poster and video contest coming up for students, and that includes some cash prizes. The details about the poster and video contest are available on the website listed below, and we're also going to have a link from the ITS webpage from that. This is the Cybersecurity Awareness Month at K-State. Again, the video from President Myers. We've got a Stay Secure guideline that you may find helpful. Here's a list of our upcoming events. I'm going to pull up that Stay Secure with some guidelines on how to improve your security. You've got some information down in the lower left or lower right-hand corner on what's happening on campus currently on the counts with phishing scams. And again, this is a number that we hope to see decline. I also wanted to share, and again, you can Google these tips and tricks, but here's from Identity Force, in particular around identity management. They provide 10 tips of things that you can do to help prevent or at least reduce the risk for yourself being involved in a data breach. And I would just like to point out that one of my favorite tips is tip number 8 about protecting your kids. It's a reminder that not only do you want to protect your own identity, but minors are at risk for identity theft, because a lot of times we don't start paying attention to our kids' digital identities until they get older and start trying to secure credit. And so kids are an easy mark for identity thieves. At this point, I'd like to open it up for questions or anything that anybody else would like to share with the group. So if you have any questions or comments, you can put those into the chat or unmute.
Betsy, so you mentioned credit for your children, locking down credit for that. If anybody has ever done that, that is a really difficult process to do with all the major credit bureaus. It's much easier for adults. My experience is that you won't get very far with the trying to lock down the kids, because oftentimes they don't have records and they won't put a hold in place. It's only if credit has been established that they're going to do that. At least that's what I found. So I'd be interested to hear any other comments on that.
So does anybody else have any experience with trying to protect your children or minor identities? And we've got 2 questions in the chat. One is, what happens if you are on the Equifax list? The last I'd heard, there's still difficulty in getting through either of the 3 credit bureaus, but overall the advice is to get your credit locked. But you do have to do that through one of those 3. That's where you would start.
Through all 3. You have to do it through all 3 credit bureaus.
All 3.
And for Equifax, it's free right now, but for the other 2, it's $5 for each person you want to lock down. The process is fairly simple, and you can do it all online. But if you're trying to get credit within the next month or so, I wouldn't recommend that, because then you have to pay to unlock it every time.
Yes. So that's a really good point. When you lock your credit, anytime you request, if you're looking at a car loan or a mortgage or any kind of credit check, you have to unlock it. Another question is wondering on the status of the CISO search. The CISO search is still ongoing, and we'll provide an update within the next week or so on that. Another question, can you describe the email filtering process we have at K-State, and if additional measures are under consideration for enhancing spam, and phishing filtering. I'm going to ask anyone else who can chime in on this. Among the things that we're doing is we're doing some whitelisting work on the listservs to try to reduce some of the availability for scamming. We continue to look at some of the options that Office 365 offers, and have done some fine-tuning there. We're looking at the use of the border firewalls for prevention of relative to sites that have been identified in phishing scams. The other things. Anybody else who could add?
And we're looking at pulling these phishing scams out of inboxes. You know, because you might remember we even have people pulling them out of junk and responding.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, so when someone reports a phishing scam to abuse@ksu.edu, those when those are confirmed, those are pulled from mailboxes so that if people haven't seen them, they won't see them. Well, yeah, they're just plain pulled from the inboxes. Okay, I'm getting some additional comments. A bank person told me that banks and financial institutions may have additional changes related to lockdowns, like charging to remove a lockdown, so similar to what was mentioned earlier. And you can put a credit fraud alert on, though at no cost. I did mine through Experian, and then they notify the other two agencies, no cost, but also is only good for 90 days. They ask for a primary phone number and an alternate so that you can be called. And that's a really good point too. With many of these breaches, you may not, if you've been involved in a breach, you may not experience any problems with your identity until months or even years later. So that is the other issue, is that data, once it's breached, it's oftentimes sold and then held over for use in the future. Question is, K-State planning to implement two-part authentication eventually? Yes, we are looking at multi-factor authentication and are moving with a pilot using a product called Duo. Initially, that will be rolled out internally within ITS, but we are looking at expanding that to some pilots outside of ITS. Our focus will most likely be on faculty and staff, but the other alternative is that we'll look at systems that are at what we would classify as greater risk, and that we might want to put two-factor authentication by system in addition or instead of by user. So stay tuned, more to come.
Betsy, you had one other question. When students receive scammer emails, who should they provide the information that they have been receiving emails to? Should they just send it to the IT department and change their password?
Thank you. Any suspected phishing scams should be forwarded to abuse@ksu.edu. abuse@ksu.edu. And there is information on the pull up the screen one more time.
And Betsy, when they forward that, they should include the headers from the email so that we can backtrack where it came from.
Okay, and looking for All right, let me find the link. For reporting. Oh, whoops. And here's a link to also instructions on how to forward the information that's in the suspicious email so that we can clean it out of mailboxes.
There was another comment that Rebecca had made that somebody had asked if you need to reset your password if you receive a phishing attempt. Did I hear that correctly, or they succumb to a phishing attempt?
The question is, should they just send it to the IT department and change their password? So you might respond, Betsy, if they succumb to a scam and if they didn't succumb to a scam.
Okay, so in the case of if ITS identifies that potentially an account has been compromised, ITS will lock that account. If an individual is concerned that their account has been compromised, then certainly immediately changing password is a good idea. But we would still like to have them report that they think they may be compromised. Let's see, sorry, the other part was
So
whether they have or have not.
If they haven't responded, do you still think they need to change their password?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry. Yes. When in doubt, change passwords. The other thing I would say about passwords is to not to reuse the same password. For instance, on your EID password, do not reuse that password in other sites. Do not use your EID itself with other sites. And that's really challenging because so many sites request that you use your email account and then select a password. And so you need to be aware of those kind of environments, because if you use your email account and then include or use your same password, then if that system is breached, then it could lead to the potential access to your case date or your email system. Other questions?
So we're about out of time, Betsy, but this one is about backing up your data. How do we share with people how to back up their data? Are there practical basics we can tell them?
Okay. So among the options, we've got...
There was a K-State Today article that came out, I think it was a couple weeks ago, that addressed this, the methods. Crash plan, cat files, OneDrive. I think I'd have to track down the link to that K-State Today article.
Okay, and I was going to say too, on the website there's information excuse me, on securing your data. Some links here as well. So currently we've got OneDrive that data can be stored on. One of the considerations though with OneDrive is the ease by which you can share information. So you need to be aware of who you're sharing your information with. Rebecca, anything else you would add?
No, but what I thought I'd do is we'll send, oh, there it is. Greg sent it, the link in the chat. Thanks, Greg.
You bet.
Thank you. All right, well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and encourage you to be safe with your own and restrictive with your own data, to question when vendors are what they're going to do with your data and how they're going to safeguard your data. But this is a growing area of concern, and it will continue to grow. We go to great measures here at K-State to protect the network, servers, services, and your data. But it is incumbent on individuals as well to ask important questions about what's happening with their data. And again, I close with what I opened with, and that is that in a global economy, it is nearly impossible to control your data. So be careful with what you share, who you share it with, and protect yourself as much as possible, but recognizing that this is a really challenging area. So thanks. I, again, encourage students to participate in the poster and video contest, and stay tuned for more events throughout the month. Thank you.
Thank you.